Today we talk about another one of our colonial Upchurch ancestors. In this case, I refer to Richard Upchurch I, who lived from 1658 to 1700. Let's give an overall sketch of this individual, and then we'll get into a few more details. He was the son of Michael Upchurch I, and the only son of Michael Upchurch I to have offspring. As you will recall, Michael Upchurch I was the original English Upchurch immigrant to come to America. He was born in, Richard Upchurch I was born in Surry County, Virginia, and he died there. Now, in midlife, he probably lived someplace else, as best we can figure, and I think he married someplace else and had children. We don't know where that place is, but we know that later in life he moved back to Surry County, Virginia, where he lived out his days. One distinctive feature of this ancestor of ours is that the facts are scarce. He was named after his grandfather in England. Michael Upchurch's father, we finally figured out, who lived in Brington in Huntingdonshire, England, had the name Richard Upchurch. So when Michael Upchurch came to America and had a son, he named him after his father. Let's take a look at the colonial Upchurch chart, or chart of the first 5 generations of the family in America, and see how Richard Upchurch I fits in. You can see on the chart here where he is the son of Michael Upchurch I, as mentioned, and then he had 2 children, John Upchurch I and James Upchurch I. He was, in fact, the grandfather of the 4 individuals who headed branches of the Upchurch family in America, and he was the great-grandfather of the people who headed clans in America. The fact is that all Americans all Upchurch Americans descended from Richard Upchurch II, given that he was the only child of Michael Upchurch I that had offspring. Let's go to the book by Belle Luter West that we often refer to. This little red volume produced in 1972. She represented the team of people who were the first to really study the Upchurches in detail, and we owe a great deal of gratitude to she and her team for carrying out this work. I'd like to read for you what she has to say about Richard Upchurch I in order to pay honor to her and to her team. On page 19 and 20 of her book, we find the following. Lawns Creek Parish Church kept no birth records during the middle 1600s, and since neither Michael nor Francis Upchurch left a will, there is no documentary proof of their children. They seem to have had 2 sons, Richard, of whom we speak, and Michael Upchurch Jr., and also to have had daughters, as mentioned by Francis. No further record of their daughters has been found. Richard Upchurch, that is Richard Upchurch I, who seems to have been the oldest son of Michael and Francis Upchurch, apparently married and lived elsewhere than in Surry County, Virginia. He appeared back on the home scene as living with Michael II, probably on the property of their father. Michael Upchurch I, according to the tithe list of the 10th of June, 1694, Richard was listed again on the 9th of June, 1699, as living with Robert Reynolds, who was probably his mother's half-brother. She cites Surry County, Virginia wills and deeds, 1694 to 1701. There is no further record of Richard Upchurch. Circumstances and dates of the appearance of John and James Upchurch, of whom later, lead us to believe that they were sons of Richard. Now, to really go back a little further in the records as to a collaborator of Belle West, let's go to the biofile of Richard Upchurch I and see the entry we have from Martha Lucy Upchurch Tidd. This I have in my records as coming into my hands on the 18th May 1968. That would be some 40 years ago. And this has information coming from her typewriter, and they were given over to Belle West, and she gave them to me. And I'd just like to read the few entries she has that give you the insight. Now, you will note that these are also entries that Belle West captured in her book, but these are the essential facts, the few facts that we have about Richard Upchurch I. He is found in 1694 on the 10th of June on the tithing list for Surrey County, Virginia, along with Michael Upchurch, presumably his brother. On the 9th of June in 1699, Richard Upchurch is listed with Robert Reynolds on the tithable list. Now, she goes on to say that after 1699, Richard is no longer found on the tithable list. Her question is, did Richard marry a Reynolds, or was Frances a Reynolds? Richard must have died shortly after 1699. He seems to have left 3 sons, James, John, and William, which agrees with the records we have even today. Now, the fact that she mentions in some prominence the Reynolds family here, and then sort of alludes to the possibility that the Upchurch family may have had close connections with the Reynolds, is a very interesting matter. I would hope very much that by close study of the Reynolds family, we will learn more about one or the other of our Upchurches. You notice that she posits that possibly Frances, the mother of the Richard Upchurch I of whom we speak, may have been a Reynolds because of the close association in one way or another with the Reynolds family. As for example, when Michael Upchurch I died in 1681, the husband of Frances, Robert Reynolds assisted the widow in the settlement of the estate. And then when Frances died in 1690, Robert Reynolds, appearing again, assisted Michael II in the settlement of the estate of Frances. So this begins to entrain the Reynolds family as having a close association with the Upchurches in early colonial days, and we have every hopes that we will find more information as we pursue this particular Reynolds family. Now, you will notice that the word tithing has been mentioned several times in what I've just reported to you. And I'd like to take a moment to say a little bit more about the subject of tithing. In the colonial days, when the United States of America, or what was to become the United States of America, was controlled by Great Britain, it was a requirement that all people in the colonies support the Church of England. And they cited this as a tithing. Now, whether or not they actually took 10% of a man's hogs, I don't know. That'll take more study, but it was a fact that that money, that tithing, whatever it amounted to, was to go to support the Church of England, and you had no choice in the matter. Now, it is a fact in those days that royalty in England did not object to the American colonies worshiping in some other fashion than in the Church of England, so long as they also paid the tithe to the church. Now, the significant part, as far as we're concerned, is that all of this caused a record to be created, such as the ones as we've just described to you here. And these are very valuable records because they show our Upchurch family members in colonial days were at certain places and at certain times, and not necessarily that they were adherents to the Church of England. Now, let's go to another book where some writing has been done about the Upchurch family. Of course, what happens is that all of us who come along and do writing about the Upchurch family rely heavily on what has gone before. And whether people admit it or not, they're often standing on the shoulders of others who've done a lot. I give you as one example, May Cox, who has written about her Upchurch ancestors, a very nice book, and she's a great researcher. And in it, she relies heavily on the Upchurch Bulletin, of which of course I was the editor and produced many of the articles therein. She also relies heavily on Professor David Ransom, whom I hired to generate a number of articles. At any rate, Cousin May Cox has done a great job of sort of reviewing all of this information and pulling it together, and that she, like the rest of us, had something to say about Richard Upchurch I. She devotes a single page to him in her book, and a little insightful note on the left-hand side of this single page reads as follows. No timeline is being given for Richard I, as this page contains all that has been found on him. She goes on to say in another sidebar, he was the most elusive of all the Upchurch ancestors. She goes ahead then to repeat the facts which we have already cited to you, which were uncovered by people like Martha Upchurch Tidd and Bell West and a couple of gentlemen. I'll try to come back some later time and talk more about that early team that uncovered Upchurch information for the benefit of we later generations. Now, in conclusion, I think we can say that our colonial ancestor, Richard Upchurch I, served a pivotal role in that he was the ancestor of all American Upchurches to appear thereafter. The references to him were not numerous, but they are solid. Let's keep our fingers crossed in hopes of finding more about them, and particularly as we look into the Reynolds family.
Thank you.